On this episode of Hunt Primitive, I link up with my good friend Kayce of HuntPrimitive to explore the coastal and intercoastal waterways of Florida's Nature Coast. We're on the search for the foods and resources of the earliest peoples that lived in this area. We'll find ourselves on the salt marsh collecting oysters and clams, then walking the piney sand hills and deciduous swamps after some beautiful forage, and paddling what seems like miles of endless tributaries in search of mullet, an extremely underrated fish not looked at today as a delicacy by any stretch of the imagination, but was a food staple for the early peoples of the area. Along the way, we'll talk to some experts, we'll have an amazing encounter with some of Florida's gentle giants, and do quite a bit of exploring into the tidal marshes and spring-fed creeks that the Nature Coast has to offer. Then we'll bring it all back, and Kayce will put us together a wonderful dinner, both a primitive style and a modern recipe that you guys can do at home. We're going to be starting this adventure in search of shellfish and the impact that shellfish had on the early indigenous peoples. Now, I'm not personally a big fan of shellfish or really seafood in general, but Kayce's from Maryland, where it's a good thing to catch crabs, and she really likes seafood, so we're going to have to lean into her pretty hard on her opinions on how edible this kind of stuff is. Give me that hand for a second. There we go. Oh, it's a lot.
Oh! Yeah!
That's in there. Live snail. Now, the indigenous people that lived along the coast weren't just eating oysters. They were eating hard clams, whelks, conchs, and scallops as well. Very opportunistic shellfishing.
We got a couple. Let's see them. Hold them out.
Nice.
We got a little clam sits right up in here at high tide. This is all under the water. We were out there digging for clams, and then we come back here and there's 1, 2, 3 just sitting just that close. And in fact, if we just look, I bet you a tiny bit more and even dig, that's a dead shell. Guarantee you they are absolutely loaded in here everywhere, because those are just sitting up on the surface. There's another one over there. That's funny, we're out there digging for clams and we found them, but right here they're just laying right up on the surface. There's another one right there.
There are seasons and size limits to oysters and clams. Now, everything else that we collected, all the different types of whelks or conchs or snails or undersized clams that we're not sure about as far as legality stuff, we're going to drop those back in the water where we found them. We just wanted to collect a basket to show what just walking along the coastline you'd be able to collect. We're just going to stick with our oysters and our couple large hard clams. We were really plagued by awful rainy weather, but that also made a perfect opportunity to take a trip up to Shell Mound, which is by Cedar Key, Florida. Shell Mound was inhabited and used as a fishery for at least 5,000 years. Located at the end of a peninsula, Shell Mound is several acres of 15-foot high discarded shells. The mound is comprised of approximately 1.2 billion oyster shells.
Oysters, southern quahog, scallops, crowned conch, lightning whelk, and other species of shellfish were collected and consumed along with fish, turtles, and seabirds. Over 1.2 billion oysters comprise Shell Mound, one of many massive shell deposits here in the lower Swanee region. So I guess quahog, clams as well, and there's just all kinds of every type of shell you could come up with.
Oh look, we're right near the Gulf now.
Yep, we're coming right out to where the Gulf is, so they're just living right. It's a salt marsh straight ahead. You can still see the elevation that we're seeing. Just how much shell. I mean, this shell wasn't brought in here to make the trail. This is what the whole mound is made from. But out there's the Gulf. Definitely kind of a tough day for filming and adventuring around, but I drove all the way here and it doesn't look like it's gonna lighten up anytime soon, so. There's the inlet to the Gulf.
Oh, look at that. That is beautiful. I love that you can't see any houses.
Yep, now there's nothing out there but salt marsh and
Some
just
gators.
little islands. The alligators won't be in here because they don't like the salt water. I mean, they can come in here, but they don't stay long. But
Wow.
yeah, you'd have bull sharks and stuff that would come right up in here. This is really all just prime oyster territory, all these estuaries and little islands. And so at low tide, there's going to be mud flats all the way around every one of these islands. So this is the absolute best place to be putting in these canoes, living right here, traveling to this seasonally and collecting shellfish and paddling canoes all the way up and down the shoreline, probably for miles and miles, collecting from different oyster beds. It certainly wouldn't be like you just have one oyster bed and they just did this all from here. This would have been a spot that they lived and stayed and traveled miles by canoe, dugout canoe, collected oysters, and then came home.
And while we're on the subject of dugout canoes, we next headed over to Silver Springs, Florida to meet with Scott Mitchell, the director of the Silver River Museum. They have a wonderful dugout canoe exhibit that we're going to have a look at.
Hi, I'm Scott Mitchell, and I'd like to welcome you to the Silver River Museum here in Ocala, Florida. We are standing in the entry foyer to our newest exhibit, which is dugout canoes, and it's entitled Dugout Canoes Paddling the Americas. The fact that it's Americas gives you a clue that it covers North, Central, and South America. It was produced by the Florida Museum up at the University of Florida in Gainesville, and it was designed as a traveling exhibit. It traveled around the country for several years and eventually came off the road and was in storage. It was offered to the Silver River Museum on a 10-year loan, and so we have it here at the Silver River, and we are open Monday through Friday to school kids and every Saturday and Sunday to the public. So thousands of students come annually and learn about prehistoric Native Americans, the importance of dugout canoes in Native societies, and lots of other interesting facts about Florida history. So this is one of the examples of a complete prehistoric dugout canoe that we have. And again, it's rare to find them in a complete state. Oftentimes you just find a portion, or they're missing the bow, or the stern, or the sides have eroded away and you just have the base. But this canoe was found in a peat deposit or a peat bog near Florahome, Florida, which is kind of between Gainesville and St. Augustine. And I believe that they were excavating peat probably to sell to garden centers, and they found this. So what happened, presumably, is the canoe was sunk in a pond that later filled in with organic material, which turned into peat. And then, of course, years later, when they're harvesting the peat, they find this. It stayed wet and buried, so there wasn't a lot of oxygen, there wasn't a lot of bacteria. That's why the wood survived. It is radiocarbon dated to about AD 1500, so probably right at the time or just before or just after the arrival of Europeans in Florida. So the first Spanish explorers that are documented show up in 1513. So it's possible that this was made right before or right after those Spanish explorers arrived. It's made from the heart of an old longleaf yellow pine, And that's another reason that it has survived, because that wood is very, very hard. It's full of pine resin. It's insect resistant. We believe that Native Americans, pre-Columbian Native Americans in the Southeast, they almost exclusively made their boats out of pine trees. It's because they had shell tools and stone tools. And the heart of a pine tree is a lot easier to burn out because of that pine resin is flammable. As soon as the Native Americans have access to steel tools, they get things like adzes and axes and hatchets, chisels. They start making boats, and the settlers, the white settlers, European settlers, they're making boats out of cypress trees as soon as they get steel tools. So the trend, often but not always, as one of my professors used to say, often but not always, prehistoric boats are made from yellow pine or longleaf pine. Historic boats are made from cypress.
While we're still inundated with pretty crummy, rainy weather, we're just going to have to toughen up, get out, collect the wild edibles that we're going to need for our different dinners that we're going to make, both the primitive and the modern one. So we're looking for mushrooms, berries, any sort of fruits or greens that are available to us in this season. It just takes a little bit of creativity.
Boom, boom, boom.
Yeah. Excellent.
That was a stick. Where are they?
One fell over here closer to me.
Ooh, they're right in the grass.
Like right there.
Yeah,
Yep.
perfect. All right, they're nice and
I
ripe.
think one fell a little closer to me as well.
Yeah, I heard 3.
Here, hold on. Such thick grass.
Nice, ripe persimmons.
Yes. Excellent. This is our little foraging basket.
Watch for them to fall.
You can hear them dropping.
There's one. Pretty.
Excellent.
Nice and translucent. Teal taught me that trick. Looking for them to be translucent so they're ripe.
Oh yeah, if you eat one that's not, you're gonna think you've been poisoned.
I don't think that one's ripe, but we can let it ripen.
Yeah, we'll let it ripen.
There was another one too. I heard another.
Mm-hmm. There's one.
Yeah, that one's not ripe. Oh look, there's 3 right here. Those ones aren't ripe, but we can save them.
Perfect.
And they will get ripe. So, yep, if they fell, we'll keep them.
We also have a ton of Spanish needles, which add a little bit of spice with their peppery flowers and their edible greens. On the grounds of the Silver River Museum, they also have a replica of a small Seminole village, in which Scott graciously gives us access to utilize the village for our evening meal.
This is a recreation of kind of a traditional small Seminole camp, and we would call it a clan camp. So clans were extended families. You'd have the Otter clan or the Panther clan, and when a couple got together, they would have to be from separate clans. You weren't supposed to marry someone from your own clan. Seminole Miccosukee cultures are matrilineal. That is, their focus, and they're organized on the female line. So a typical camp would be a grandmother with 2 or 3 of her daughters and the daughters' families. So the daughters' husbands and the children living around that grandmother. If you go to the reservations in South Florida today, you see clusters of buildings. They're modern buildings, but you'll see 3 or 4 buildings in a cluster. And what you're seeing is actually that's a grandmother and her granddaughters living together. So they still organize themselves that way. There would be a cook chikee like this with just a bare earth floor. There'd be shelves and hooks and things, but the gables are open to let the smoke out. The difference with the sleeping or the living chikees is that the gables are thatched, they're closed off, and they typically have platforms that are up pretty high. And that's where you would live and store goods and sit up there and sew and do whatever you had to do. Or You know, if you're sleeping, you're using mosquito nets. You got hammocks for babies, things like that. So a typical camp would be a cooking chickee and then living chickees centered all around it with the various families using the communal kitchen.
You can hear the oysters popping open, so it's dark, but it's ready. They're just about ready to eat. And the greens and the mushrooms are all cooked down. It's going to be a good meal after a long, wet day. Perfect. Ooh, that one's still hot. Perfect.
So after a really long day, a halfway decent meal for a guy that doesn't really like seafood, and a relatively okay night's sleep, we did get out the next morning with a little bit of sunshine left, and we managed to get a couple mullet shot. But we went back, watched the footage, and either the camera or the SD card, something was completely blown out and just didn't give us the look that we were wanting to see. But this was it. We were rained out the rest of the trip and until Kayce had to go home. So after coming back and watching the footage and realizing what happened, we figured that's fine. After getting completely rained out, we decided to kick it down the road another couple weeks, and Kayce flew back in. The weather got a little bit cold, but we got back after it. And the good news is that's just about the time that the mullet run started. So these little springs, little tributaries really started to fill up nice with fish. With all the dugout canoes that we showed you, I bet you're wondering why on earth we're not using a dugout canoe to either go bow fishing in or to go collect the oysters. Well, believe me, a dugout canoe is pretty hot on the list for me to make, but finding a tree big enough nowadays to cut legally, not to mention the amount of time that it takes to put the whole canoe together, that's a huge allocation of time. Now, we do hope to be able to put that together at some point, but then you also need a team of fellas to pick this canoe up and put it in and out of the water, and then storage also becomes an issue as they can potentially rot over time if they're not kept in a homogeneous, either very wet or very dry environment. So trust me, I would love to be out there in a dugout canoe, and maybe you'll see us in one in the future.
Got one. Got one. Go get it.
Yeah.
Swimming around down there.
Oh my gosh.
No, back paddle. Back paddle the other side. There you go. Yeah, there you go. There you go. All right, now paddle the other side.
Okay.
Now paddle the other side.
Oh my gosh. Come on. Come on.
Pick up the other one. Oh yeah. That one was a fighter. It was a little one.
Wow.
But it was a fighter.
Yes, he was.
That's a fighter. It's just a little guy.
Yeah. I would wait to shoot. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I see them up. Oh, they're up here. Yeah.
Okay.
Keep going straight. There's
Okay.
a whole pool, and there's a bunch of big ones.
Okay.
I just better get lucky in there.
Nope, make this one count.
What's the noise that? Oh, that's it.
Yeah, buddy.
Made that one count. You can pick up the camera.
Okay. Nice.
There's a nice one.
Woohoo!
All right,
Dinner is served.
that's a good sized fish there.
That's sweet. Nice shot, buddy.
So now what we're shooting these fish with is all contextual to what early man had. We're shooting one of the HuntPrimitive Osage bows with a genuine deer sinew string. And then we're also shooting long fletchless river cane arrows tipped with antler points. So we have two kinds here. We've got ones with a barb and then ones without a barb to really see is there a huge difference. And what we're truly finding is occasionally the barb kind of saves you from losing one, but for the most part, once the fish penetrates up onto the shaft, it just whirls around in the water and it can't get off until we can grab a hold of it and scoop it up out. So the points are made out of sections of deer antler that are relatively straight, and then we use a stone flake to scrape them out and then also grind them on a flat abrasive rock. And the shaft is reinforced with sinew and then coated with a waterproofing pine pitch glue. Got that one.
Yep. Yes.
Oh man, that was lively.
Oh, okay. Back.
Oh,
Oh no!
that was such a strong one. It was so big.
Oh my gosh.
It happens.
All
That's
right.
with a barb too. It got off with a barb.
And that's the second time that's happened to us.
Yep, even with a barb. It was down in, and I was trying to. It was up here so hard, but that was a big one.
And that's the second time.
You think that the barb's gonna save you, and it doesn't always. All right, we'll go back and get that arrow.
Okay.
Then we're gonna fish
Oh,
all
yep, I see them over there. They went this way. I might have to turn your camera.
Best thing that you can do is turn that camera right now.
Okay.
And there was not a single fish shot in this
They
city.
just went by us.
Not all of them. Got one
Yes.
there. All right, good. Turn the camera.
Okay, I got it. Yep.
Do it.
Hold on.
That's right, I got it.
Yeah.
Perfect. Didn't get all the way through that one, but that's a good one. Woo! Here's the boat then, huh?
Yep. You got this. Mm-hmm.
See them bubbling,
Mm-hmm.
so they've got to be right at the surface. Just face that, yeah. Oh, yeah, right there. Got that one.
Yes. Oh. Yeah, baby. Oh.
Back us up, back us up.
Okay. Okay. He ain't going nowhere.
Yeah, that was good.
I'm trying.
Oh.
He's still swimming. Oh. Okay, hang on.
Come on this side.
Nice.
All right.
Number 4.
4 in the boat. Yep.
4 in the boat.
Yeah, it incapacitated that one.
Sweet.
With the mullet run in full swing, trust me, there are plenty more fish out here to shoot, especially in the big springs, which are kind of tourist traps, so we try to stay out of those, the ones that's got hundreds or even thousands, quite frankly, of mullet in there, which really shows the availability of this resource to early people. But we're just paddling some of these backwaters, shooting ones here and there, and we get to a point where sure, we could have a lot more fun and just put a lot of fish in the boat, but we got what we need. We had a lot of fun, and we're going to start heading our way out. But don't give up on it yet, because there's still a few great surprises in store on this adventure.
I want to touch him. I see him. He's right there. Can't see him anymore.
Now we're going to head back and cook these fish. Kayce's going to put together a heck of a dinner for us, but no trip to Florida is truly complete until you've seen dolphins, maybe an alligator or two, and of course manatees. Which all three of these would have been food sources for the early people living here, but that's a different story for a different day.
So we are actually back at the Gill residence, and with our catch today, we decided to make a more modern dish. So any of you that watch my channel know that I like to incorporate foods of nature, which a lot of these foods were also foods of primitive people in this area. So today we are working with mullet, and a lot of people dismiss this fish and think that it's not a very good fish to eat, and of course there's better fish out there. But today we really created two amazing dishes using this primitive food source. So one of the first things we did with this mullet was I basically just did a modern stuffed fish, what people usually do, using some parsley and some lemon and some garlic. We were able today to also find a whole bunch of chanterelles. So we made a wild rice and wild mushroom chanterelle rice dish for a side dish. And then for this dish, which I absolutely love, was some mullet with a beauty berry sauce. And then of course we have some wonderful local Florida fruits. We have our dragon fruit. We have, of course, the Florida avocados. Star fruit is not local, but this is a locally sourced star fruit. And then we have a couple wild edibles that are actually right out of Ryan's yard. So we have some Spanish needles and some Turk's cat. So this is an amazing dish. It's delicious. We actually made one similar the other night. So this just gives you an example of the wonderful foods that you can get from the wilderness and incorporate them into your modern life. You don't always have to eat like a caveman. Oh, heck yes.
That's a good one.
That is nice.
That's a really nice one.
Woohoo!
Perfect.
Sit down. Now,
We're pretty dedicated to being out here. It's just about pouring rain. We've had a couple days of rain on and off, but it can't stop us from getting out and doing stuff. We're not made out of whatever melts in the rain. I don't know.
Sugar.
Sugar. We ain't made out of sugar.
Definitely ain't that sweet.
No.